Hey everyone, welcome back. Today, from an uncommon career to coaching and consulting, Jenn Smith of Flourish Careers Podcast is an absolute rock star. Before she came to become a career coach and an HR consultant for heart-based professionals, her roots were deeply grounded in corporate America, including 15 years in HR departments at Fortune 500 organizations. So she's here today to share not only her really interesting professional story, but I think we can get her to share a little bit of her HR expertise as well. And before we start, I just want to give you a shout out, Jenn, because you and I were both on Mac's list showcasing the top career podcast of 2024. So congratulations.
Yes. Yay. Shout out to us. I love these little celebratory moments. It keeps you going when the grind is there. And we all know the work that goes into podcasting. So thanks for the shout out.
Oh my goodness. Absolutely. It's so much fun to have these moments. But let's get right into it because you have a really interesting story. And I think one of the ways that you described it once was, I started my career making chips. So tell us about that.
That I did. And so, yeah, let me just kind of take you to this moment in time. So picture this, and this is a pretty defining moment for most people. So you and your friends are graduating from college, right? It's that defining moment. And I will tell you that some of my friends had landed jobs on Wall Street at these very sophisticated banks, and they're relocating to New York City. Meanwhile, I'm packing up a U-Haul and moving to a very small, unknown town about 3.5 hours away from home. As I get into my first post-graduation job, my alarm clock is ringing at 10 p.m. I'm dragging myself out of bed in the pitch dark to get ready for work. Picking out an outfit is easy because I have a uniform, which is steel-toed boots, khakis, and a company supplied polo shirt that's about 3 sizes too big because they didn't have women's sized clothing in manufacturing. And then, of course, you have to wear a hairnet. On the way to work, the drive is quiet because everybody is turning out their lights and going to sleep. Once I'm at work, I get notified that 3 people called in sick. There's a piece of equipment that's broken. And the main ingredient to have a successful shift, which is potatoes, did not arrive on time. And so my work shift consists of scurrying around to reschedule each person, track down a grumpy mechanic to fix a machine. And then once the potatoes arrive, rolling up our sleeves, literally shoveling up potatoes in order to help the team catch up. And then my shift comes to an end. The sun is rising and I'm heading home smelling like salt and vinegar or sour cream and onion. So this was my experience as my first job post-graduation. I worked the graveyard shift as a frontline supervisor in a potato chip factory.
Okay. What? I mean, part of what comes to my mind is, okay, normally we're bright-eyed and bushy-tailed out of our bachelor's degree and we're like, we're going to go change the world, right? And most folks either go to somewhere that they think is so cool or they stay local. But you decided to go to a rural location, wear a uniform 3 sizes too big, right? So tell us, how did you decide for this particular career?
Well, not much thought went into it, to be honest with you. So I was always very career minded. In college, I went for business. I had no idea what I wanted to do. I was a frequent flyer in the career services office, just trying to figure out what I could do. And so I remember seeing on the school's intranet a job for a team leader. And it was with Frito-Lay, which is part of PepsiCo. And I was like, oh, PepsiCo, like that's a great organization. Obviously, Frito-Lay is a big division under that umbrella. And I thought to myself, it said team leader, and the job responsibilities were really similar to like when I was a team captain and assistant store manager. And I was like, oh, you know what? I think I could do that job. And I think the salary was like $38,000 a year. And I was like, oh my God, like I thought there was like so much money. I was like, oh my God, I could totally like do this job and make that money. And I didn't really know anything else. And so I applied for the job online and got the phone call. And I will tell you, it's a very rigorous interview process. They brought students, recent grads from all over the country to interview for this role. And I call this a survivor-like interview because we all got there at 8:00 in the morning. And as the day went on, they were letting people go. And by the end of the day, there was 2 of us left. And that was 5:00 in the afternoon. And I thought, oh my God, if I make it through this interview, I have to take this job, and I didn't even know that it was the night shift. So the two jobs that they had available was one was the overnight shift potato chip team leader, and the other was weekend sanitation. Now, I think I got
Oh,
the better of the deal. My buddy got weekend sanitation, but so I really didn't know. It was just kind of like, hey, this happened. I'm going to roll with it and see what happens. And that Sheryl Sandberg quote, I always tell people this. It's something like, if you're offered a seat on the rocket ship, don't ask what seat, just get on. And that's honestly what was going through my mind. I'm like, let me go try this for a year and see what happens. I ended up working in operations for 4 years, not all on the night shift. But then that work allowed me to transition into HR, which is where I spent the rest of my career. So totally uncommon, not a normal path at all. But I felt like I really learned how to run a business in that role more than any other job, primarily because when you're working third shift, you're just with a couple other supervisors. So you have to make all the decisions. You're making decisions around cost and safety and quality and staffing, all the things. And trust me, you don't want to be the one to call your boss at 3 o'clock in the morning because you can't make a decision. So I felt like, yeah, that's a lot of responsibility, but I learned so much so quickly, and I'm super grateful for it.
wow. That is a really neat story. And I love the quote you shared because it
Mm.
brings to life the why, right? You started this story. And if I'm listening, my thought would be, oh my gosh, where did she go work? But then you said it was PepsiCo. And I was like, I get the appeal.
Yes.
I get the appeal. But your quote is so important. You said, if you're offered a seat on the rocket ship, don't ask which seat, just get on.
Mhm.
And how has that impacted your career moving forward, even after that graveyard position?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I will say, I think that's good advice early in your career. However, as I've learned throughout the years, I took whatever job came my way, quite frankly. There was very little time where I paused to figure out what was next. It was almost like, oh, I felt so grateful to work for this company. I'll do anything, kind of thing. And then I was like, wait, this is really draining my energy. What could I do more of that's going to generate my energy? And so I felt like I learned this the hard way in the early years until I really paused. And one of those moments of pause, I'll never forget this moment, was when I was working in operations. A senior director came to the facility I was working in and he said, so Jen, what do you want to do with your career? And it was like a deer in headlights. I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't know. But I also knew that operations wasn't for me in the long run. I liked it, but I didn't love it. But what I really loved was the people side of the business. And
Mhm.
that's when I paused and I said, oh, I'd really love to get into HR. And so did some work around figuring out how to get into HR. And then that kind of made my career more intentional. Still not fully there yet throughout the different roles in different companies within HR. But I think at that point, it was like, okay, the power of the pause and figuring out what's next, tied to what I like doing, what generates my energy, tied to my strengths, the things that I'm good at. And so this started me thinking about career development. And now I use a lot of these stories and these practices in my career coaching frameworks with professionals and in helping them make changes. So,
Oh gosh, that was so rich. I don't even know where to begin, but we're going to start with this. The very beginning of your response. And I think we're going to get into more of your coaching in just a second because I'm so
sure.
curious to hear about that too. And I know people listening are as well. You talked about fate, like what you said made me think of phases. You said it's good
Mm,
advice early on. There's sometimes things that you're alluding to that's depending on the phase you're in. So you sometimes need a different mindset. And the mindset
yes.
you adopted to either protect you from something or to help you succeed in something in one phase of your career can move with you, but then become unproductive in later phases of your
Mm.
career. And I'm curious, it feels to me like you have thoughts and insights and experiences around that. I'm curious if you can share.
Yeah, I'm glad that you pulled that out because I agree. There are different phases. And I like working with early career folks a lot. And sometimes I see that there's so much pressure. I got this degree in engineering and I have to go be an engineer for the rest of my life, or I got this degree in education and I have to be a teacher for the rest of my life. And I actually think that phase one, that early phase of your career, is a great time for curiosity and exploration and internships you can even do to start to answer some of the questions and figure out what you really like doing. in college, I think, is a great way to gather some of that information, but you really don't know until you get into it. And that's where you'll learn the type of work that you really excel in, what you enjoy doing, what you probably going to learn what you don't enjoy doing more than what you do enjoy doing. And all of that's information to make an informed decision for your next best role. So it's the mindset of curiosity early, taking those learnings and then thinking about, hey, what's my next best role? I don't need to do this forever. How can I learn and grow? And how can I take those transferable skills into something that's going to be more fulfilling for me? And then I think that's probably mid-career is like making some more intentional decisions and choices. And then maybe later in the career, it's like, okay, I've learned all of these things throughout my career. How do I want to make a difference? How do I want to make an impact? How can I use all of this wisdom that I've learned along the way to really dig in and make an impact in an industry I'm excited about? Use all of the skills that I've grown to be good at in a role that's going to continue to generate that energy and take me to whatever might be next throughout my life. So that's kind of how I think about it.
You have a framework. I'm like typing furiously as you're sharing your answer. You have a framework. It almost feels like if I am looking for clarity, it's like you just sat me down and said, okay, great. Let's find what fits well for you in this season.
Yeah.
And you mentioned in the beginning, it's if you're offered a seat on the rocket ship, just take the seat on the rocket ship, right? Be curious, try out all the things in mid-career. This is so valuable. And I don't think enough people talk about it. What is your next best role? So often people come and they're like, I want to be the CEO of my company, or I want to be a VP, right? And it's like, okay, perfect. Where are you right now? And they're like, oh, I'm a specialist on customer service.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, that's a big jump.
Yeah.
Let's find some stepping stones and let's build out a long-term plan and then figure out what that short-term position is. And then that I want to make a difference in your later career. There's so much to go off of here. I'm going to start with this one piece and we'll see where this goes, but there's so much richness here. I'm curious what your thoughts are when you have clients. If there's someone listening right now and they're like, I really want to work with Jenn, but I'm curious, how do you help me determine, especially middle career, right? Because a lot of listeners tend to be like middle to later career. And they're kind of like, I'm like in my 40s, maybe 50s. How do I know if I'm in the season to search for my next best role, or if I'm in the season when I need to look at the impact and the difference? And what I hear about a lot is if I need to start slowing down, because some folks are feeling like the burnout's coming and we're trying to decide, is it the environment? Is it my habits? Or is it the season of life?
I like that. So one of the things I listen for when I meet with folks is trying to understand what's important to them in this season of career. So if you're mid-career and you have littles at home, your values and what's important to you is probably going to be different than early or later in your career. And so I always like to start from that perspective. So when you think about your values, I break them down into core values and then lifestyle values because lifestyle is so important. Sometimes I even reverse engineer and say, hey, like, what's the lifestyle you want to be living right now? And then let's reverse engineer from that. Because so many times people are at the point of, what's wrong here? What's broken? Why am I feeling like this? And so then reverting back to, okay, let's figure out what's important. And then we can make the decisions from there. And then I love actually working with folks to figure out what those values are. And then when they come up against a decision, I'll encourage them to go back to those values, like literally writing them down and then go back to those values based on this decision, rate each one of your values. So if flexibility is one of your values in this season of career, let's rate this decision. Okay, you're going to go be a COO. Let's see how much flexibility you're going to have on a scale of 1 to 10. And then based on what's important right now, it becomes very eye-opening in terms of what that decision might look like. And those values will shift over time. They're not written in blood, they're not written in cement. They're going to shift over time. And so it's important to reevaluate those at different seasons in your career as well. So that's usually the starting place. And then from there, I'm always listening and I kind of said this before, but what are you interested in? What kind of impact do you want to make? And that can be big or small. It doesn't have to be this altruistic stuff. It could just be like, hey, what am I interested in? And that can lead to a potential industry shift depending on where the person is. And then I'm always listening for the type of work, like actual tasks that someone likes doing. And how can we do more of that? A lot of times people are good at something, but they don't like doing it. So how do we combine what you're good at and what you like doing? And then those organizations that are going to be a fit. So are you more comfortable in a smaller, tight-knit organization? Do you like being in the sea of 80,000 employees around the world? And so really you're uncovering all of those clues and then starting to map that towards a path. And my philosophy is really around this heart-based career planning, and heart is an acronym, but it's really about alignment and then knowing that it's going to shift because things are moving so rapidly in our world of work today. So
Mm.
I don't know if that makes sense, but
Oh, it made perfect sense. It spoke to my heart.
oh, good.
I was like, yeah, it's both practical, but also allows you to be a human in the process,
Yes, of
which is
course.
so, so, so important. So I'm going to give you a heads up. I do want to hear, I know that you and I talked a little bit about you creating some of the recruitment program
Yes.
at Thermo Fisher. So I want to hear a little bit about that. But right before we mention that, you were talking about values, enjoying the tasks they're doing. I'm curious what your thoughts are, coach to coach. And I think it would be important for the community to listen in, kind of get behind the scenes of this conversation.
Sure.
I often meet with clients and we look at their values, and it's very clear what their values are. Then we start going into, okay, let's find your positioning to come up with your branding. And then it's like it shifts because that financial pressure,
Mm,
the fear of a potential pay cut, which sometimes
mm,
does need to happen if they're making
mhm,
a big shift, or also the worry that if I choose this,
mm.
then I won't have as many opportunities, right? What are your thoughts at that pivotal point when we're about to start the branding? We did all the work on the values, and it seems like the values don't matter. Let's focus on, this other thing.
Yeah. I guess what I would encourage folks to do is to try to gather more information. So, what's missing or what's causing that pause? Like, what is it really? Like, if it's, oh, I think I have to take a pay cut. Well, do you know that to be true? Go out. Let's go out and talk to some people that are doing this job in this industry, in the location you're working, and find out, is that really true? Do the salary. The salary is a big piece because nobody works for free. We know that. But then I
Mhm.
also encourage folks to think about, in this season of career, how much is enough? So a lot of times we're just like, we just need more, more, more. But do you really
Mm,
need more, more, more? Like, what is enough? You know this too. Like when you go from a steady salary to nothing, I'm starting your own business. I mean, there's no more, more, more there. You got to figure something out. And so I encourage folks to think about what is enough and then go back to those values. Say, okay, this is what I need to be happy and fulfilled and have that security, and knowing what that number is and knowing that that's important. Nobody out there, you don't wear your salary on your sleeve. You don't wear your salary on your LinkedIn profile. Nobody knows but
mhm,
you. So it's
mhm,
okay as long as you have what you're looking for. Like think about that. And then the biggest piece here is just gathering more information. So if
mhm.
you're nervous about something, what is it you're nervous about? And let's go get the answer to that question so we can move forward. So it's like tiny steps to break through that fear, that anxiousness, or that hesitation.
Yeah, this was valuable. Two things I heard in there is that there's two perception issues that
Yeah.
potentially could be going in with all of us. This is just this is our brain protecting us,
Yeah.
right? One is a perceived limit or a perceived need that
Mhm.
I can't make less than what I'm making right now, or my life will not be what it is.
Right.
But there's levers. And if you pull down one lever, another lever goes up. And so let's really look at what will life look like. And then the other perception is the perception of what is going on in the marketplace, what these
Right.
positions pay, right? And so, like you said, getting the facts. So, actually digging in, building out your budget. What do
Yes.
you actually need? And then also, what is actually the salaries out there?
Yes,
It's
I
just,
love how you pulled that out as perception. So thank you. You did a great job there. Yeah, as kind of like a theme because it is there. And you can even take that a step further. Oh, what are people going to think if I make this change? Or I'm not going to go to the COO. Like there's so much with perception and it really is. It's getting the facts. And I work with so many folks that talk themselves out of something before they even try or before they even gather that information. And so that
mm,
information is so valuable. And then just to take that a step further, when you go get that information, you're going to get it usually from a human. Hopefully, you're going to get it from somebody and you can build a relationship with that person. And then that person is part of your network and then they'll help you move into whatever it is that you want to because people genuinely want to help other people. And as long as they know what you're looking for, they'll be able to support you. So I think
mhm.
by doing that activity of asking the questions and getting the information, you're doing two things. You're getting the information and you're building your network in a really thoughtful way.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Thank you for bringing that up. You do such a good job of bringing in the human factor, but then also here's what practically needs to get done in
Mm,
order to move that human aspect forward. So, thank you for that. Okay, so I'm going to shift a little bit
sure.
because while we can talk for hours and hours, we all have schedules. So, I know you and I chatted about the fact that you built a college recruiting program, which I think is
Oh
so cool
yeah,
because I
so
was on the
fun.
other end of that recruiting program.
Yes, right.
So tell me a little bit about that and how that led to what you're doing now.
Oh my gosh, I love this. Yes, I don't get to talk about this that much. This was one of my most favorite roles in my corporate career. But I'm going to tell you, when I first got into HR, so this is back early, 4 years in operations, and then I moved into HR. One of my first projects was to develop a regional internship program. And we didn't have one, and we needed to start from scratch basically. And it was so much fun. And then my second project was to staff our frontline supervisor roles, which is the job I did right out of college. So it was so much fun to go to the local schools and recruit frontline supervisors to do a job that I did. So I could tell them really what the day in the life was like, especially when you're trying to talk somebody into coming to work second or third shift. It's not that easy.
Yeah.
But we got some great folks that joined the organization that I'm still in touch with today that just had beautiful careers. And it's just so exciting to watch. And so that was kind of the foundation. And I always remembered that experience and how much I loved it. And then I did lots of different jobs, ups and downs, U-turns, all the things in HR. And then when I was working at Thermo Fisher, I noticed an opportunity to build out the college recruiting. And I didn't have the exact experience other than that initial little stint that I did, but it always stuck in my mind. And when I saw this opportunity pop up, I was like, oh my God, I hope they will give me the chance to do this. And as luck would have it, they did. And so it was really fun. So we were tasked with building out not only the program, but basically the strategy. And so when I first started in this role, there was one coordinator, and I say that she was kind of like a travel advisor. So basically, like what would happen was someone would call her up and say, hey, I want to go to this job fair at X and X school. Can you sign me up and send me a tablecloth? And she'd be like, sure. And that's what she did. I was like, what is happening here? Like, this is not what, this is not strategic. This is not what we do. And so we sat down and said, what are the goals of the organization? And the idea was really that we wanted to bring students in as juniors and seniors, have them work with the organization, and then pipeline into either leadership development programs or frontline supervisors or whatever it is. So we ended up reverse engineering that goal and saying, okay, these are the schools that have the programs that we're looking for in, let's say, engineering or finance. So let's start with intern programs for them to see if they're going to be a fit, and then invite them back potentially if they're a junior into a senior year, and then hopefully pipeline into a frontline role, which to me would be so much nicer as a student or a recent graduate to know the organization and then to be building my career from college versus me going in like, who knows what I was thinking or doing, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it was really fun. So we picked schools, we built a team, we ended up with 5 or 6 recruiters all over the country, and we ended up hiring hundreds of students and recent grads into these internships and leadership development programs.
Okay, that's really
It was
neat.
fun.
So you're in this position that, by all intents and purposes, sounds like a blast. It sounds like you're making a really big impact. I've got to ask the question, why leave such an amazing
I know.
position?
I know. And it was such a good team and all the things. But it was interesting in that role. It was really eye opening too to see how much help people needed, not
Mm,
just students and recent grads. I mean, we were also hiring MBAs, and I could just see the struggle on the other end. So the resumes, the interviewing, the questions they were asking, I was like, there's a disconnect here. And I loved the work of kind of coaching folks through the process. And I saw the need on the other side. Now, this was before career coaching was even a thing. Like it was a thing,
mm,
but like barely a thing. And so I was like, oh, I wonder if I could use this insider experience and help job seekers on the other side. So I ended up getting a career coaching certification and then started a side gig with the Muse. They're a big career coaching platform. And I got hired as a career coach, and I was super excited. And so then I was like, had this demanding day job, and then I'm doing career coaching like nights and weekends. And I just saw the energy that was generated in my work when I did the career coaching versus the day job. And it just started
mhm.
to shift my perspective. And I thought, wow, if this could be my job, like how cool would that be? And it was getting to the point also my corporate career was like 15 years and I always knew what was next. Like I was super excited. I was like, oh, I'm going to go try talent management. Now I want to go try this recruiting role. And at that point, I felt like my corporate career was complete. There was nothing else I really wanted to do. I definitely didn't want to go be in the C-suite. It was just too stressful for me. And I always had it in the back of my mind to start an online business. It was in the back of my mind for quite frankly, like 10 plus years that how could I do this? And I kept watching people be successful at it. And then taking that tiny action with the career coaching as a side gig, I'm like, I'm just going to give this a shot. So it was December of 2019, 2020, new decade. I was like, oh my God, this is going to be the best year ever, best decade ever. I'm going to start my own business. I was so excited. So I literally ended my corporate career in December of 2019, went into 2020, HR, Flourish Careers, HR consultant, and career coach. Super excited. Boom, pandemic, March of 2020. I literally lost my breath. I was like, oh my God, what did I just do? I quit my
Wow.
whole life, and now we're going to go through this chaos. And I remember this moment. I think I heard it like on the radio or something where University of Pennsylvania was telling their students not to come back after spring break. And I was like, OMG, the amount of logistics and like effort to tell students not to come back after spring break. I was like, something really bad is happening here. And I totally panicked. But then it ended up to be a blessing in disguise because I had so much more time and energy to support so many other people that were going through job loss, companies closing, rethinking their lives. Like all this stuff was happening. And I had the time and energy and space to help people through all of that chaos. So talk about divine timing. I don't know, but it really felt like that for my change.
Oh my goodness. Okay. So there's this flurry of change. Then there's a pandemic,
Yeah.
more change, right? I would love to hear, if you don't mind sharing, how you have brought in your prior experience and how you started maybe filling some gaps. I know I came from education and I certainly had some gaps to fill. So I got experience, education, et cetera. But for you, how did you determine what those gaps were? How did you fill them and bring in all of that HR knowledge that you have into the process?
That's a great question. And the grounding thought that I had was I know how organizations work on the inside. And I felt like that was going to be really valuable for folks to get hired. And so, kind of having that insider scoop, which I want to share a couple things that I think would be helpful for your listeners there. But the one thing for me that was really hard, and it was a big gap in the beginning, was I felt like I had to have all the answers. So I'm the coach, I've been in HR, like you're coming to me for help. I have to know what you want to do with your career. And that's just not the case. And so it took a while for me to learn how to support and guide without taking all of that on myself. And to this day, people still come and they want me to tell them what to do with their lives. And that's no one can tell you what to do with your lives, but we can figure it out together. And so that's where building the framework and asking the questions but it definitely took a long time. And it was super stressful for me in the beginning when I felt like I had to have all the answers. I don't know if you've experienced anything like that, but it's really hard.
100%. Where when you're a coach, it's like a similar skill in counseling where you are sometimes the wall that emotions and projections and feelings are thrown at. Like it's all the rewarding stickers, right? Where
Yes.
where you get to see the beautiful moments of
Right.
change, but also there's no one else. Like when I'm grumpy, my husband's there and I'm like, I'm just grumpy, right? Right. But when you're in the coaching process and I'm talking to you and you're the coach and I'm like, hey, Jen, I just want you to tell me what to do. I'm so sick and tired of going through this process. I just want clarity and I'm frustrated. It takes everything within us not to feel like it's us, right?
Right.
It's just a part of the process. And so, again, it's part of two humans interacting and helping each other. If there is
Mhm.
no conflict, there's usually no progress.
Yeah, that's
So I
true.
think
That's a
that's
good
good.
point. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, I could talk to you forever, but I love that you mentioned some practical tips. And I said at the beginning of the episode that we were going to try and pick your brain a little bit. So let's start right where you are. Like, what do you have in mind that you think people need to know from your HR experience?
Yeah. So there's a couple things, but the first one, especially for job seekers, is I want people to know that when they're in the job interview, applying, whatever it is, networking, The HR person, the recruiter, the hiring manager, the team, they want you to get the job. I know there's so much pressure that you have to perform, like do all these things to get the job, but they are rooting for you because think about when you've been on a team that was understaffed. It's so stressful. Everyone's working overtime. You have to fill the gap to get the job done. So think about that when you're applying and interviewing for jobs, that there's a gap on that team that you're going to fill. And this team is rooting for you. They want you on the team. So I recommend to folks to use that kind of mindset as you go through. And then just to add on to that, use the recruiter. If you're working with an internal, and I'm talking like this is inside a corporation, that's this experience that I'm coming at it from, but use your recruiter as a resource. So ask questions. If you're not sure who you're going to interview with, ask. If you're not sure how long the interview is, ask. If you want to know what they're going to be interviewing you on, ask. They want you. And trust me, as a recruiter, if you've got 30 jobs you're recruiting for and you can help a candidate close one of those jobs so you can move on, they're going to be thrilled and so happy to help you. And it's also going to show that you're proactive as a candidate, asking those questions and trying to be the most prepared. So that's the first thing I would say. So hopefully that resonates.
Oh my goodness. Yes. It's kind of like, I don't think this is the best analogy. I really don't, but I'm going to say it because that's the one that's in my head and we just go with it.
Yeah.
It's kind of like when mom and dad are like, hey, it would be helpful if you cleaned your room. And you're like, I don't care. But then Jordan Peterson says, clean your room and every room in America is clean. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like, and I think you as having firsthand experience, and I don't have that experience. And so I think it's so valuable to hear it directly from you who has seen so many people go through this process that they want you to win.
They do.
So go into it helping them to help you win. Like,
yes, exactly. That's exactly right.
All right. So I get this question a lot, and I thought it would be great to just pick your brain a little bit about it. So job seekers always have a hard time with the salary question, and I help them triangulate a process, but I always think I cannot be the person who has the best process. I know I'm not the person. And so asking an HR expert, how can job seekers determine their market value to come up with a minimum, fair, and ideal salary for a particular position at a company?
Yes, I get this question a lot too. So, the first thing I will say is that most recruiters and leaders and hiring managers are going to expect you to negotiate. So, don't be afraid to do that. And so, the first thing, obviously, is to do your research. So, the three things you want to take into consideration are the level and the experience that you have, the location that you are going to be working, if it's remote. So now that things are more and more remote, some of these rules are changing. But if you live in a very high cost of living city like San Francisco or New York City or Boston, you need to make sure that you take that into consideration in your salary request. And then making sure that you understand your value, what you bring to the table, your unique experiences that are going to add to that organization. And this is becoming more and more open because organizations and states have policies now that you have to put the salary on the job description. And so if you know what the range is going in, it makes it a lot easier to bring that discussion to the table and know whether or not you're going to fit into that. So if you're in a state where it's not posted or it's not on a job description, or if the range is like 0 to 1 million or something ridiculous like that, then I always recommend asking the recruiter for a range or a budget before you give your number. And when I was a recruiter in a phone screen, I would say, hey, the salary range for this job is this to this. Is that acceptable for you? Yes or no? Let's move on. Sometimes people won't do that. They'll play hardball, which is annoying to me, but you try to get them to give you the range first, and then you know if you're in the ballpark, and you can take those other things I just mentioned into consideration as you're figuring out what that number is. So that's just some of the insider tips that I would share there, if that's helpful.
Oh, it's very helpful. And I think it's part of what's really helpful is reiterating that fact that you don't want to share your seller expectations first because they become an anchor in multiple ways. But also, the reason why I personally have a conviction that the company should share their transparency first, and I appreciate you for that, is because the company at that moment has all the leverage. Right. And so when you have all the leverage, you also likely, not 100%, but likely set a budget. And so that number is already there versus as an individual, number one, you don't necessarily have the leverage unless you're an individual contributor who's like the expert on a particular topic. but you're also one individual who can make executive decisions for yourself, right? Versus the recruiter and the department don't quite have control. So sometimes I help clients to use that tactfully,
Oh,
respectfully,
yes.
with appreciation in that conversation to share, I know there might be a budget. I tend to be a little flexible, but I look at things holistically. And I also want to learn more about the organization and the role and
Perfect.
for us to get to know each other. But I can't tell you how appreciative I am. And I hope if you're listening, I hope you wrote all those things down. She talked about not only the role and the range they posted, but also the size of the company, the amount of experience you have in comparison to what they need, your location. And if it's remote, you don't go to New York and expect a New York salary because they are going to take your location to consideration.
Yeah.
And then, of course, your value and what you bring. Okay. I'm going to ask one more question, but then I'm going to give you a heads up. I also want to learn about how you develop your heart focus process because it speaks to me. And I
Aw.
think it speaks to people listening. And I know we
Amazing.
want to hear about it. But the first question or the last question, base compensation,
Mm.
right? So many of us look at the base compensation and, we're like, I have to make sure I can make it on my base compensation or I'm not taking the role. But
Mhm.
I'm curious, how can a candidate best use all that we've talked about to arrive at their ideal compensation package if the base compensation doesn't quite meet their expectations?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, you want to take the whole package into consideration. And so, again, going back to your values and what's most important in your career at this time. So, I'll just give a personal story. There was a time where I was relocating all over the place for my job, and I really wanted to come back to Buffalo. That's where I'm from, Western New York. And so I was interviewing for a job and I loved the team. And I just had this feeling like there is no other time in my career where I will get to work with a team like this. And the role was in Buffalo, the city that I wanted to be living in. And the salary was less than what I was making. But because I valued working with a team that I knew that I was going to love, I was going to feel comfortable at work, and I was going to be in my hometown, though that decision to take less than the base salary was the right decision for me during that time. And so going back again, what do you value right now? Maybe it's flexibility. So maybe the salary is, let's say, $10,000 off of what you were expecting, but you have a ton of flexibility. And that's what you need right now because you have littles at home and you need to be there for them. There's so much that goes into it. The other thing is health benefits are a really big deal. It's one of the reasons I think most people still have corporate jobs is because of health benefits and how expensive it is. Maybe take that into consideration. If they have 401k match, that's basically free money. Also, one of the things, this is like a super insider tip that I share with my community all the time, is that sign-on bonuses are so easy for companies to say yes to. So if there's a gap in your base compensation, let's say $10,000, $15,000, and you say, hey, I really want to work for you guys, like I'm super excited about this, but there's a gap. Is there any way you'd be able to close some of that gap or that entire gap with a sign-on bonus? I just did this with a client. They said yes, literally on the phone. They didn't even need to think about it. So of
Yeah.
course, that's not going to be in your base. It's not going to, evolve over time, but at least it's something for
Mhm.
you to consider and something for you to ask for as you're making that decision. So I always say everything is negotiable. So don't hesitate to ask,
Mhm.
especially if it's going to make a big difference for you in the decision to say
Mhm.
yes.
No, absolutely. And that sign-on bonus piece is thank you for that insider tip. Because if you think about it, almost immediately after you get hired, sometimes I'm like, hey, and if you want to work on getting promoted, let's focus on those first 90 days. And
Yeah,
so it's like for people who want to advance quickly, that sign-on bonus is really big because it fills the gap while you make your case
perfect.
to maybe you have 1 year at the slightly lower salary, but then you come back up and that sign-in
Exactly.
bonus is a big help.
I just have to mention that too. I love that you mentioned like the growing with the company because sometimes you're in a situation where you might take a role and get your foot in the door, but no, that's not the end game. There's long-term potential there. And that's what my mindset is going back to Frito-Lay. I was like, I know I'm just getting my foot in the door and I know this organization is a well-run machine and I'm going to grow my career and I'm going to learn so much. And so it's that mentality, kind
Mm.
of getting it in there and then thinking in the long game.
Yeah, it's sort of coaching through strategy,
Yeah,
right?
there you go. Yeah.
Which I love it. Okay, everything you shared so far, I can feel like the heart focus behind it. Like you said, pull back the curtain. How have you developed this heart focus process and how does it impact clients?
Yes. Thanks for asking for this. And that really, it started out more of this repeated story that I was hearing for folks and that I actually lived myself around work taking up our entire day and not feeling fulfilled, and to the point of burnout and exhaustion and sickness and all of these things. And it just got to the point where I was like, oh my gosh, like we're spending a third of our lives at work. Like we have to make it in alignment with who we are. And there's so many expectations out there from parents and well-intended expectations, society, social media, all of these things. And so the philosophy is rooted in you. So what do you want out of your career, regardless of what anyone else says? So what is close to your heart, grounded in your core and lifestyle values right now? And then it just grew from there. And the acronym, actually, the H stands for heart-centered. So you're making decisions that are aligned to you and your values. The E is energizing. So we're doing work that's lighting us up. So I think about industry equals impact or interest. Energy. So like when you think about the role, it's going to generate your energy to move forward. So H is heart-centered, E is energizing, A is agile. So we must be willing to shift and adapt in this world of work because things are changing so rapidly. So having that mindset, like take the pressure off, this isn't forever, I'm going to learn and grow. The R is rooted in rituals. So the R has evolved over time, but I'm a big fan of rituals. And the T is tiny action, which means just taking one tiny step every single day or consistently to make a change happen or to grow and develop in your career. And the ritual that I always mention to folks is it's called 5 minutes to flourish. And so this is how I've made every single change, every single big project, starting a podcast, starting a business, everything was just spending 5 minutes before my day got crazy on one tiny thing that was going to drive me forward. And that's how I built the momentum. And those 5 minutes really adds up over time. And before you know it, you've made a change and you have a framework and you're moving forward. So that's a little bit around kind of the philosophy, the acronym, and what it's rooted in.
Okay, this is awesome.
Oh, thank you.
It's like each piece is a part of the larger puzzle when it comes to navigating life transition and when it comes to behavioral changes, right? All those transformative pieces. Okay, I know there's people who are already thinking, okay, how do I work with Jenn? So tell us, how do we find you? Sure. I know you've got a podcast. Like we said, it's on Mac's list. So tell us all about that.
Thank you so much. Yeah. So my website is flourish.careers. And I'm on Instagram at flourish.careers. I'm on LinkedIn, Jennifer Smith, career coach. It's kind of hard to find because there's a lot of Jennifer Smiths, but maybe if you search Jennifer Smith, Flourish Careers, that would be helpful. And then my podcast is the Flourish Careers Podcast. So thank you so much for mentioning that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll put a link to your LinkedIn. I know personally connecting with someone is, especially when you hear them on a podcast, it's like, oh, now I'm connected to her, right? So I'll put that link in the description. All right. Any final words?
I guess final word would be around change. So we've talked a lot about change and making changes. And I guess just like one more insider tip is that businesses change and make different decisions all the time. So if you're in a situation where maybe you're super excited about a certain company, but you fell short during the interview process and it didn't work out, just know that inside a company, changes are happening all the time and you never know. So I always encourage folks to stay connected, and you never know, like you might have been a runner up for a job and then all of a sudden they need two. And so they're calling you. And so I think it's just really important to know that changes happen. You're never going to know everything that's going on inside an organization. So first, don't take it personal, but then also stay connected in your network, and building your network in that way is going to do wonders for you as you move through your career.
Love those last words. Thank you so much for sharing those. Thank you for everything you shared throughout today's episode. It was jam-packed. It was just full of the human perspective, the practical perspective, some great tips. So again, thank you for coming on and sharing everything.
Thank you, Patricia. And I just have to say, your community is very lucky to have you. You are such a joy to talk with and so easy to connect with. And I just appreciate that. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. And everyone listening, thank you so much for joining us today in this conversation. Know that we love you, praying for you. We'll see you on the next one. Hey, thanks for listening. I really appreciate you spending time with me today. If you found this episode helpful, please tap the 5-star review on the show's homepage in your podcast app. It would absolutely make my day, and it helps others discover the Uncommon Career Podcast. Now, to download your free career resources and learn how I help seasoned professionals land amazing offers in as little as 90 days, click on the link in the description or go to theuncommoncareer.com. Thanks again, and I'll see you on the next one.